Good morning to all of you in the Devil Dog Day Trade community. My name is Michael and I'll be taking you all through my day trading setup process for today, December 8th, 2021. Special welcome to all of you who are serving or have served in the armed forces, and we do save the best for last here, so a very special welcome to all my fellow Marines out there. Semper Fi, Jarheads. For those of you joining us for the first time today, we are on a journey together here, and we have people from all skill and experience levels as part of this community. But don't worry, there is information presented during this session that will hit every one of those different levels and experiences. However, if you're watching the live session and you have a question about something or don't understand it, please just post a comment in the chat box. If you're watching this show later on, just leave us a comment below or contact us through the website, and we'll make sure that we get your question answered as soon as possible. Just a reminder that the feed here on YouTube is delayed by up to 30 seconds. So if there is a delay or gap between when you ask a question and when I see it to answer that question, that would be the reason why there. So let's just real quick take a look at what has happened in the last 24 hours and what's going on in the next 24 hours that could potentially impact our day trading setups. First of all, last 24 hours, nothing really big at all. There were no major events that we have to worry about. Looking forward to the next 24 hours though. Next day, we've got today, December 8th. Look here in this column, anything with the red in particular, sometimes orange folders that we want to pay attention to. We've got a couple of Canadian dollar items at 10 a.m. We don't really worry about that because we don't actively trade that. However, we do have the U.S. JOLTS job openings. That can absolutely cause the market to swing in one way or the other, so we'll be watching out for that at 10 a.m. And then anyone that's trading crude oil at 10:30 a.m., you've got the inventories that are releasing there. That used to be a much bigger impact over the past about year and a half or so. That has turned down into a very much smaller impact overall, so we don't expect any major changes from that. Anyone trading the Australian dollar, just take note there. We do have the governor speaking at 5:05 p.m. our time. All right, moving on into our index and correlation areas here. We'll start with the DAX, and looking at the overall daily chart here, we are not seeing anything major. We did have the significant move up yesterday, which is what we had expected. That weekly zone there below here, the larger one here, is working out and working out very well. We've got a couple of smaller time frame zones. Let me just jump down to our 60-minute chart here just to get an idea what's happening throughout the day here. A couple of smaller 60-minute zones here you see embedded actually within the weekly one here. That just shows overall strength. We do have this area right in here, and unfortunately on TradingView I can't follow our standard legend that you see at the top of your screen there, so I can't do a dashed line here, but just to highlight this area right here. All right, this is an area, again, another zone that does fit our criteria. And again, this does show that there's overall strength in this market here. So just watch this line. If price drops below here throughout the day, we could get a correction back down to some of these lower levels. All right, so moving on, let's move over to TradeStation for the rest of our charting. Here, we're starting with the dollar again. And I just want to point something out here on a daily chart, just to kind of get an idea of how I look at these things just at a quick glance early in the morning like this. When you see a chart like this, especially on the daily time frame where you've just got candles that are just bouncing back and forth within, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days ago. Until we get outside of this area right here, just know that we're not going to get any good consistent longer term moves here. So it's just a very quick glance where you can see, okay, I need to be cautious on the bigger time frames. Take shorter trades, take smaller targets, and not worry about price jumping back and forth on some of these lower time frames here. So with that being said, yeah, there's not a whole lot to look at in the dollar. Just as I'm looking through here, there's nothing jumping out at me that I think we need to pay attention to. We've already got our previous areas marked, and so until we get to those, just know that price is probably going to be a little bit fluctuating there. Moving on to the VIX. So volatility did take that big spike down as we had expected it with the way that the other markets were moving. We did get down into this area of interest here, and as you can see, we did come down into it, spiked out of it just a little bit, and the VIX market being a little bit less precise, right? When you see this wick did come below the level right here. Not stressing out about that. Again, we don't actually trade this, so we're not really worried about exact lines where they're drawn on the chart. Just know that we're still in this overall area here, so there's still a potential that this entire area could work. We've got a little bit of negative RSI divergence going on right here, which could indicate a correction back up. So just keep an eye on that. Let's see if we've got anything on the 240-minute chart that could give us an indicator of where it would correct to, and there really isn't anything here right now. Same thing on the daily chart. Yeah, we're just right in the middle here. We did expect this move down, like I said, we talked about a couple days ago, but then again, there's nothing even close below that we're interested in digging into at this point. So let's move on and get into our indexes. Do you want to take a look at that? I'm going to start with the Nikkei just because it's a correlation index for us as well. Japanese market has been open overnight. So again, we can sometimes use this as a good indicator of what the U.S. markets may do. There's nothing, we're not even close to any of our daily zones. So I'll just move straight down to the 240 area. And we had this previous zone that did work very well. Prices now come up through it, and as expected, especially shorts on an index market, we don't expect it to work more than once, and it didn't. We do have this area right below now that a larger pullback, a larger correction here could get us back down into this area. However, we do have another interesting area, and I'll leave it at that for now. Right here, where we do have a rally in, base candle, three leg candles out, which typically means a pretty strong rally. This move here, this rally right here, did take out this these areas to the left, so that adds a little bit of strength to this number. And again, this is an index, so it's designed to go up, so that's why we have a +1 factor for pretty much any longs that we take here. Yeah, I would definitely expect if price does come down here pretty quickly, we could definitely see this working to get back on another long position on the Nikkei. So again, just a little bit more strength there, and proof of that. That's an overall positive thing for us. Jumping down to the 60-minute chart, what we're seeing here right now is a potential setup for that correction. Even though we don't have any zones that we're looking at, you're seeing this, price came up very strongly, is now flattening out. You've got a couple of pops above the upper Bollinger Band here. Look down to our RSI chart. We are seeing negative divergence here. So would not surprise me at all to see this little bit of a correction right now, and maybe back down to that 240 area. We do have this 60-minute zone as well down here. So any one of those, right? Those are good places to get back on this long. But this corrective action right here, if price jump back down from that, would not be a surprise at all here. All right. Let's jump into our U.S. futures markets now. And just a real quick point on the 240-minute chart. We drew this line the other day. This purple line here was our breaking point, a 240-minute chart, to prove that we were actually changing trend based on the daily area that we were looking at below. That has happened. So as you know, we'll look down here to see if there's anything interesting to get down on a 240-minute chart, and there really isn't. So I just want to take a look at the daily one again, just to get an idea of what we might see coming up here. And one of the things I want to just point out here, we've got a really good picture of the price with the RSI action as well. And so, and we talk a lot about the RSI being one of the very few indicators that we use to give us additional odds and enhancers for what may happen with price action. And we talk about negative divergence here. And just to be clear of where we look at it and where we don't. So we had it, a very clear indicator of it on this chart right here, where we had price action going up. And when we look down at the RSI chart, we had the RSI was moving down. Now what you're going to see is price is continuing to move down here as well. And if price actually came up above this 42.70 or 47.42 area, it would almost look as though we still had that continuing negative divergence. What I have seen is that this negative divergence view resets if price goes either above or below either one of our green lines down here in the RSI indicator. And so what you see here, right, price came all the way back down. We did go below it right down here. So that resets it. So even if price comes back up higher here, but the RSI line is still lower than what it has been in the past, I ignore those, and it's now no longer negative divergence. It would have to do it again, later on down the chart. So if price came, up here, dropped down again, and then up again, and then did it, again after kind of resetting that indicator, going below that lower green line there. So just a kind of a helpful hint there to know, when do you continue to look at that for that negative divergence, or when does it kind of have a logical resetting point, so to speak. So jumping over to our 60-minute chart just to see if there's anything that we want to take advantage of here today. Very similar picture to what we had on the Nikkei, right? We had this very strong move up. We now have price kind of tapering off a bit, a couple of jumps above the 2 standard deviation line on our Bollinger Bands, and negative divergence down here on our RSI chart. So again, setting up for a potential correction here. Yesterday we did draw this line here that was an interesting area, and sure enough, this one did work. However, it barely touched it, so I'm going to leave this open as an interesting area. Again, if price comes all the way back down into here and you get some other indicator that it's going to work again, would definitely take this one as a trade right here. And again, a much stronger zone right below it as well. These would be areas to get back on if this corrective action does actually happen today. Going down to our 15-minute chart, let's see if there's something that we like, just as a smaller time frame trade here. And generally speaking, the answer is no. Again, we're not looking to short here at all. We have confirmed trend change in the lower time frames. So looking down and left, I got nothing here that I'm interested in taking on the S&P 500 futures. All right, jump over to NASDAQ. And just again, a refresher of where we sit on the daily picture and why this area is working out so well. Came right into our zone. Let's go ahead and mark this one off. It's worked out very well for us. And where are we going to get to now? So if you look down here at the RSI, we notice that it didn't actually completely reset. The RSI did not go below this lower green line here. It came right down and almost touched it, but didn't quite go below it. So as price comes back up, if it comes up and sets a new all-time high, we'll have to take a look at that on an individual basis, maybe compare that with something like the ES or the RTY to see if we've got a confirmation that anything else is could potentially change there. But we will monitor that. But right now, price continues to move up. We'll check to see if we have the same view of this correction action on the NASDAQ. Now what we do have, just move that chart down to the wrong area. Fix that for us. This line that we drew here, purple one again, this was the confirmation that trend was going to change. That hasn't broken yet in the NASDAQ. So we are still officially in a neutral area. We haven't changed trend going back up again. So we need to be very cautious of that. This does need to break here in order to confirm, that multiple indexes now are in this additional move back up again. Looking down, we still have these two areas here that are good, strong zones. So if we do get a corrective action here, that would not, these would be really good spots to get back in on it. Let's go see what we got on the 60-minute time frame. And just as a note here, so we talked about this area right here on the zone on the 60-minute chart yesterday. And I had said that because we hadn't broken that 240-minute line, this was an option to still get into. But again, because it's a short in an index market, those are always one strike against them. What I did with this one was watched it throughout the time that it was in this zone. I looked for any other indicator that it was going to work. None of the other indexes showed any weakness, and I got no stronger negative divergence on any of the lower time periods that I was looking at. And so I just ignored this one, and we did not take it. Pull that one off. We are seeing this view here, which could be a correction. Same thing, right? Strong move up, tapering off, touched the upper Bollinger Band limit here, and then now we're dropping back down again. And unfortunately, there's nothing on the 60-minute chart until we get all the way down to the 15,957 area right here that I would look to get into. But we are seeing that same view that we could have this potentially small corrective action here. But again, overall strength still moving up. Okay, jumping over to our 15-minute time frame. And we had these areas here drawn. And again, I left them up here just because we had put them up before, but we had clearly changed our trend on the lower time frames. So again, this was a counter trend trade on an index market, which again, very rarely works. And you can see that the bottom one right here did get us would have been like a 1-to-1 right before it broke. Now the upper one is still potentially working, so this is a good area to look for that corrective action in. So if you're following some of the things that I've been talking about, where you have zones like this that are that you're not certain about, and you look for that additional odds enhancers or indicators that's going to work. When you saw that corrective action picture that we just saw on the 60-minute chart, you can look at this and go, oh, there is actually a zone here. So taking trades like this, even it's counter trend trade and it's a short on an index market, these are the ones where you have enough other indicators where that increases your probability enough where the trade is worth taking. Again, anytime you're doing these types of confirmation trades or ones that don't fit your exact criteria, always make sure you are adding additional risk mitigation to the trade, whether that's a smaller position size or potentially setting half of your trade at a 1-to-1, so that if it comes back on you, you at a minimum break even there. So just some other rule that you have that allows you to lower your overall risk for those trades, since they aren't quite as high probability. Again, looking down and left, there's nothing that we see that we're interested in until we get into this this lower area here at 16,068. All right, let's look at RTY. And just real quick here on the 240-minute time frame, because I drew a couple of lines. One, I think we talked about 2 days ago, the upper one here at basically at 2350. That's the one that has to break to confirm a trend change. I put this other one down here because that gave me the line to break at 2257. That gave me, at least we're changed to a neutral trend, right? We haven't moved into a uptrend yet, but that at least let us confirm that we're in neutral trend. So we are here. We still got a ways to go before we can confirm we're back in an uptrend on the RTY. And just to zoom in real quick and look down and left, I'll mark this area right here, but I'll tell you it's very low probability for me. It technically fits our criteria for a zone, right? It is a zone, but the structure of it isn't good. Sorry, that should be dashed lines, not dotted lines. However, we'll mark it area of interest, and we'll watch for when price comes back down into here again. One of those areas we're looking for an odds enhancer or another indication that it's going to work here. Jumping down to our 240-minute, or sorry, a 60-minute time frame, and you can see we've got the same picture on all these indexes for this corrective action happening. So again, these again, the words that we use here are important, right? I'm talking about indications of a corrective action, not a zone that it's responding to. We trade zones, we don't trade indications. This just lets us see, and reliably so, when a corrective action may occur. In index funds, they sometimes don't corrective actions from moving back down again because they're just sometimes they're so strong. Again, they're built to move up, so they will sometimes do that even against any other indication that is showing. So just please keep that in mind here. However, it wouldn't surprise me to see price do some sort of a corrective action here and come back down. We've got nothing on this 60-minute area that is interesting enough to look at. So let's go take a look at a little lower time frame. Let's jump down to our 15-minute and let's just zoom in. Looking down and left, nothing. So if we do get this corrective action, it's going to need to be a bigger one to move down into the areas that we already have noted. Otherwise, I would just be very cautious of what we do as far as getting back on longs on the indexes today. Now that being said, let's I want to take a little bit closer look at the bond market, because that is one of the indicators that could tell us where the indexes are going in a little more of a medium to longer term time frame here. And there's just a little bit of uncertainty across all of them, so wanted to take a little bit deeper look into that today to see if we can get a clearer picture of where these things might be going. And let's start. I'm going to start with the ETF. So TLT, so this is a 20-year bond. And again, since we're talking about bigger picture moves here, let's start in the weekly time frame. And what we see here is almost this perfect consolidation view as well. Let me just reset my toolbar here so I can show this. Actually, I'm going to zoom out to show this a little bit better first, right? Where we've got these lines here, right? Where price is it's starting to move smaller and smaller and smaller. So we're looking for that breakout activity here, right? So that's just one thing to note here. Now we'll zoom in on the weekly zone here. We saw this one worked a little bit, came back up into it, and is now coming back down again. What we don't have though is any negative divergence on the RSI here, so no clear indication from TLT that we're going to change a major direction overall. There's a possibility that this weekly zone may end up working, and I just drew this upper line a little bit too close. If I would have drawn it 2 points above or 1 point above right here, we would still be thinking that this was working. So my potential misaligning that zone doesn't necessarily mean that the area has been compromised yet. So again, basically what this says is there's not a super clear picture on just TLT at the weekly area. So let's go back and look at the daily one. And what we're looking for, just because we don't have any real zones that we're working on, we're looking for other indicators. And just the first one you see right off the bat, we did pop for several days above the upper 2 standard deviations on our Bollinger Band. So we were expecting it to come back down again. We did not get any negative divergence on RSI, so there's only one indicator that we have this move down. And we do have a zone below here down at the 140 area that could have the price move back up if it gets down to there. But no other zones, no other clear picture here yet, even on the daily area. 240, we'll just look very quickly. First of all, no zones that we're tracking right now. No negative divergence on RSI, so no validation of any expected moves here. And then on our 60-minute chart, the only thing that we have is kind of confirmation that this initial corrective move was going to happen, whereas you had price continuing up and up and up and then poking above the upper Bollinger Band just like it did on the daily chart, and now it's moved down and you're now flirting with the lower Bollinger Band. So again, this could be a drop down here and then pop back up again. Again, no clear indications, so the picture is still a little bit uncertain at this point. So with that, let's look at go over to futures markets, right? And we'll start looking at the 10-year, and we'll do the exact same look here. We'll start with the weekly. Now here we are in an actual weekly downtrend now. We have 2 lower highs, 2 lower lows, but we do have 2 fairly strong zones coming up here that we're interested in saying they are marked as areas of interest only because of the size of them, not necessarily just because of what the overall structure looks like. So we've got an indication now that price is still moving down. However, it can't move down very far before we're going to get some sort of either bigger move out or a corrective action. You will see we do have negative divergence on RSI. So price moved down here. RSI on the bottom indicator here has moved up. And so if price comes back down again into these areas and we still have that negative divergence, very strong indicator that this upper zone is going to work and going to work potentially in a very strong manner. On the daily chart, we're creating the perfect example of white space, from the Trading 101 videos, right? Where price is just bouncing back and forth, up and down between actual zones, not even just areas of resistance and support right now, but actual zones right here. And so, however, we do have price coming back down again from this upper area, which is in alignment with what the overall weekly move is. However, as you can see, if price comes back down again, not only do you have it hitting that what we saw in the previous zone or previous chart or the weekly area, you have another zone on your daily chart as well, and it would potentially set up for negative RSI or negative divergence on RSI on your daily chart as well. All of those would be very, very strong indicators of another move up. $240-minute time frame, we've got another area of very significant interest, or actually an actual zone that we've drawn out before we get to this lower area here. So again, this was, I wouldn't say this is going to be the trend changer move, but because this zone is good solid formation and a very small risk, you still get a good solid trade out of here even without changing trend at all. So we'll keep an eye on that one as well. But again, what we're starting to see is more and more indicators that price is not going to break down past a certain point. It actually has a potential now to move back up again. So down on our 60-minute chart, we actually just hit this area right here. Literally in the past 60 minutes now. So we're coming down here. We've technically speaking, if this trade would have been on at this exact level, we would have broken down through it and gotten stopped out. But this overall area is still a very strong one. We're seeing, again, prices coming down below the Bollinger Bands. We have negative divergence on RSI here. Again, wouldn't expect a 60-minute to change the overall daily trend, but it certainly is worth getting into for just a shorter time frame trade. Maybe something that finishes off in the next couple of hours, walk away with some profits, and then come back later if price continues to drop into our bigger time frame areas. So going from our 10-year bonds, let's move over to the futures for our 30-year bonds. A little bit different view here. Starting from the weekly chart, we got a little bit more strength here, but again, we're just going back and forth between these actual zones and ones that have worked out fairly well for us in both cases. This move up into this area, we had the good indications that this one was going to work. Sure enough, it worked coming back down again. So there's no longer term trades you want to get into right now on either of these markets. A lot of good indications on the weekly areas for both TLT and TY. A very strong one once you get up in the 170 area for a bigger move back down on the US. So just good, again, good indications, good confirmations on both sides. If price gets out of this white space area in either direction, it looks like we're going to get a pretty substantial move from either one of those. Going to our daily time frame, the only thing that we have marked here is this zone below. And again, once price gets back down this pivot low here, chances are you'd be breaking the 2 standard deviation line below and coming into a zone, and this would probably line up with one of our other TY or TLT ones as well. So again, we've got 3 times confirmation now that if price moves in a significant direction lower right now, we have areas where we could look at potentially very, very strong moves back up again. 240-minute chart here for US, and let's, again, area of interest. It's not a strong zone, but we're going to watch this, look for indications either on TLT or on TY where you have a corresponding area, corresponding zone. If you are, this turns into a trade rather than just an area to watch. But again, we need that confirmation. And then now moving into our 60-minute area. So again, we had an area right here that was an area of interest. This does line up with the zone we saw in the 60-minute chart for TY. So again, coming down below the Bollinger Band line here, negative divergence on RSI. You see that? All really, really good indicators that these areas will work for a trade. Again, not a longer term one. We're not going to change the overall trend of the market, but you could get a reasonable trade today on both of those areas. So bigger picture, we've still got, looks like some weakness overall, but the weakness has a good ending point. We've got areas on all 3 of the bond markets that show a setup for a bigger move up once it gets down to those areas. So look for a weakness short term, but a much stronger move up once we get down into those areas on all 3 of the markets. Again, we'll be watching that throughout the day, and if anything changes drastically, we'll send notes out through social media accounts. So keep an eye on those. Set up your alerts so you can get those throughout the day that help give you some additional information and context of where the markets are going. All right, so we took a look at the bond areas, a little bit more of a deeper dive on that today. Hopefully that helps understand and again, bigger picture context and where we see some of these bigger moves coming and when to do things. And really, one of the most important parts of trading is when not to do things. So we're going to wait on those and wait for those setups to mature and for them to align, and then we'll take advantage of them when they show up. All right, let's get into the rest of our futures markets here, especially the ones that we actively trade. So we'll start with oil, crude oil. I just another note too is building a couple of documents that we'll be posting up later on, some templates that everyone can use. And I had completely forgotten that recently that they had introduced a micro version of CL. So oil can sometimes be a little bit difficult to trade because you need a larger contract size or a larger account size because of the margins for that. But they do have a micro version of CL now, so that's 1/10 of it. So instead of it being $100 or a $10 per tick, it's $1 per tick. So that's opened up to much smaller account sizes. So if it's something that you were staying away from before because of how much margin you needed, take a look at getting back into that and using the micro contracts. I have found oil a very, very solid market to trade, very reliable, relatively easy to chart, and it responds well to supply and demand zones. So overall, I would definitely recommend that you take a look at it. Again, if your account size was holding you back before, look into the micro futures for potentially getting into it. So we won't jump into our daily chart because we got a ways to go before anything is of interest there. Same thing on our 240-minute chart. Actually, let me go ahead and just pop this one open because we do have the areas below. Just want to make sure that we get those. The main reason why we're interested in these areas down here below is they were generated from that the previous 240-minute zone that's below here, right? The one that we almost hit. That this was in an area on the weekly chart that we knew that that we had an indication that price was going to change there. And as I look down and left, we actually did have one form yesterday where this is, this whole area here is technically a zone. So I'll go a little bit deeper into it. Obviously, on a 240-minute chart, could be a fairly substantial amount of risk. So look at digging deeper into smaller time frames to find a better entry point here, or maybe using micros itself. But this is looking left. You've got some indications, right here it's a little bit lower. That price has changed here. So overall, it's not a bad area, especially since we think that there's some additional strength in the oil market overall. All right, down to our 60-minute chart. Again, here we do have confirmation that we're at least in a neutral trend area here. Zoom in on this. We did have a little bit of indications right between yesterday, this peak here, and where we came up to here, right at the Bollinger Bands, that you could get a small correction. And looks like we got a little bit of one. It wouldn't surprise me to get a little bit more of one coming out of here, but we've got that area on the 240, and you also have this area here on the 60-minute chart. Good solid areas to get back in on the long positions for oil here. All right, very short time frame now. Let's look at our 15-minute chart. See if there's anything here. Again, a shorter time frame, clear confirmation back of an uptrend. So that's why we're interested in getting back long again. But as I'm looking down and left, just not seeing anything that's jumping out at me. That's a clear area to get into. So we'll stay away from those and just look for those bigger time frames on a 240 and a 60-minute area where we could potentially get into. And just another note, right? So you've got on a 60-minute chart, you've got this area at 69.10 to 68.72. You'll see on my 30-minute chart, I've got that same area a little bit, more narrowed down for so maybe a little bit less risk. But it's the same exact area, right? 69.03 to 68.73 area here. So that's an example of one of those things where you find a zone on a higher time frame, and you look at a lower time frame, and sometimes you can minimize your risk a bit by adjusting your entry and stop points there. All right, let's look at gold. Gold's been jumping all over the place the last couple of days, and obviously on a very small time frame. It hasn't done much on the larger one. Again, we'll just start at the 240 because we're still coming up and out of this area that we had marked down here, that we did have additional confirmation that was going to work. So if you're in this trade, hold on to it. It is still working. It looks like there's still relative strength in the market. You look at the correlation markets for gold as well, right, which is a dollar. Typically speaking, dollar weak, gold is strong, dollar's weak, and right now the dollar is dropping. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see gold continue up for a while out of here. We are getting close to our nominal target area. So yeah, up in that right at that 1800 mark there. So I wouldn't expect price to move too much past that. If you're going to hold on to something there, just make sure that you're moving your stop up just in case it does come back on you. 60-minute area, and again, just gold is so volatile, honestly, is probably the right way to put it. It can be really hard to find solid zone structures here. I'm looking down and left, man, there's nothing there at all that's worth taking a trade on. $15-minute zone, we've got a very, very weak area, but an area of interest. I will say it again, you'll see this and go, yeah, that doesn't fit any of our structures. And I agree with you, it doesn't, but This area right in here, just the way the overall picture looks, technically speaking, right, you got your leg and candle here, 1, 2, 3, 4 base candles, right? The wicks are all bigger than the bodies, and then you have a leg out candle right here. It's a very small leg out candle. Now you did have another push up in this area. So I'm saying it's not pretty, but just kind of as you train your eyes to look for these areas, even though it may not fit the exact picture that we're looking at individually, the bigger view of it, right, it still catches your eye. So just mark that as an area of interest. And again, if you're going to take a trade in here, look for confirmation. Like go down to like a 2 or a 5 minute chart. See if you can get confirmation that price would change here. All right, let's move on to our natural gas. So we're still seeing some strength coming up from the other areas that we identified below in our weekly zone. So just a quick reminder, we're addressing this zone right here. And we looked for confirmation at lower time frames that this was going to work. We originally had it where it didn't look like it was going to. 2 days ago, I guess, Monday. It sent that note out. And then yesterday when we talked about that again, and I'll just bring this up to show. Right. So the original one that we had talked about was price coming in right here, and then it dropped down, and there wasn't negative RSI right into this area. So that's why I sent the note out that we're not going to take this. And then literally, what was it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours later, we did have a drop down below, and we did get that confirmation of negative RSI. And so looked at this when we looked at it yesterday at the, let's see, it would have been about, yeah, the 8 to 9 o'clock hour. We were seeing this drop back down again. Still confirmation of negative divergence on RSI. So I think I said, this is the area where we would take this again, but you just had to be careful because you were dealing with additional risk involved. But it was still in that weekly zone, and so price has continued to move up from there. Not unexpected. But again, this was just a lot of risk in that trade because the zone was so big. So there was just a fair amount of uncertainty there. And so if you didn't take it, don't sweat this one, right? It was a little bit mean looking. It wasn't quite as clear as we wanted it. But that's why price is moving back up from here, is because it's coming back up out of that weekly zone. If that weekly zone holds, right, and we get a confirmation of trend change, something like the 240-minute chart here, which honestly, I mean, that's got to go all the way up to 5.4. And it's weird that my lines on my chart don't show up on the screen. You guys are seeing. I have to look in to see why that is the case. So let me draw one that you can see. Right, here's your breaking point. It's got to get above that line before we have confirmation of trend change. So that's a big move right there. And those type of big moves really make it difficult to get in on trades in a reliable manner. So let's look at, we already looked at 60-minute time frame. Yeah, there's not a whole lot else I want to look at. I'll just drop down to the 15-minute because we have we have an uptrend on the 15-minute chart. So you could get into this move on a lower time frame, but again, this will be something if you're using this lower time frame to jump in on the bigger move, take off like half your position or so, or maybe like 3/4 of it, at a 2 or a 3 to 1 ratio, and then leave a runner on, but then just keep moving your stop up so that you don't lose all of your profits if this thing does turn around. Looking back down into this area though, what I'll do is I'll just draw a couple of areas of interest that kind of just jump out at me. This one here is partially used. Price did jump right back down into it almost immediately. However, still relatively good structure. It wouldn't surprise me that this one would work, and then down a little bit lower, you've got an even better one right in here. So either of those would be good places to take. Again, get back in, maybe take most of the trade off as a shorter term trade, and then if you want to have a contract or two run on it, just keep moving the stop up from there. All right, I think that's it for our active futures. So let's go ahead and take a look at GLD index, since we've got time now. And just looking at the charts overall, I don't see any zones that I have drawn at this point. So just going to point this out on the 60-minute area. We're still coming back up from this previously used zone. I don't know why that color didn't change. Let's fix it. Nice squeeze of our Bollinger Bands coming here, so we know a bigger move is coming out of here, but we don't have a zone that we can use to predict where that move is going, so we're not going to try and jump into something, as a gamble rather than a trade. A little bit of an area of interest right here. We are still in an overall downtrend though, so this would end up being a counter trend trade, so I would be just cautious of it. But again, if you've got good other indicators that this could work, definitely an area of imbalance. Just not sure how. Yeah, I'm not sure how big of a move you could get out of there. So I wouldn't get in this one, for a very long-term move. All right, we've got. Let's go ahead and move on to cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. We had this very significant, very strong zone on a daily chart. Here, price did hit and moved up from, and a pretty strong move. We're seeing again some additional weakness right now, but remember, we're in a zone coming back through into the lower Bollinger Bands here, and just looking down at our RSI indicators. We'll have to see what happens when price gets all the way down into there, what would happen, but it doesn't look like that there will be any negative divergence here. So if this one breaks, I would definitely expect a much bigger move down. But honestly, this is still a fairly strong zone. So I still feel it still appears as though this is going to continue to move back up. Let's look for some other time frames to see what else we're looking at here, and on a 240-minute chart. So zoom in on this one. Obviously, it's big, very big, strong move down. Price is now coming back down again, and here we would actually have, if price does come back down below, we would high probability we would have some negative divergence on RSI. So another indicator that this zone would continue to work. And again, nothing up and left that we see that would be obvious points where this is going to stop. 60-minute time frame. Talked about this. It was either yesterday or Monday, where we have this kind of standalone 60-minute zone down here. And the only reason that we marked this at all is because it's in a daily zone. Right? Just if this was not in part of another zone, we would never mark this as a zone, because it is a complete counter trend trade. It's it doesn't. There's no other indicators behind it. Looking left here, so only reason it's on here is because it's in that 60-minute or in that daily zone. Area of interest only. Don't take the trade automatically. Watch for price to change direction in here, and if it does, these are the trades that could work, very, very big, because you're taking advantage of a smaller 60-minute area, but really, you're playing off of that bigger daily zone, which is the much stronger one, which you'll get a much bigger move out of. All right, let's look at Ethereum. And where do we sit on Ethereum? daily perspective again, yeah, we're just kind of this back and forth. Right, nothing here of interest, nothing here that we're going to get into for longer term until we get out of this white space area right here. And 240-minute time frame, we're still moving down from this previous area. Nothing between here that has created any new zones that we have to pay attention to. On a 60-minute, go ahead and just change this over so that we make sure we know that it's used, right? This was just our confirmation area from the 240-minute zone. This area here is starting to look a little stronger, right? And the reason why is we've got a little bit of white space forming right here. So anytime price drops below it, it's high probability that's going to work, right? If price does keep coming lower, you're probably going to be outside of your Bollinger Band as well. Check for negative divergence here, but this is firming up into be probably a little bit better area where you could actually take a trade here rather than just monitoring it. All right, and look at the 45-minute zone here. So yeah, we have this area too that we talked about yesterday that's already been used, but very strong one. And looking down and left now, we're actually in a 45-minute, or responded to a 45-minute zone just a little bit ago. I will zoom in on this so we can get a better look at it. Barely touched it. I mean, it just barely touched it here. So again, just maybe a little bit of confirmation that we've got more strength moving up rather than down at this point. But you're still in a sideways trend here, so I wouldn't go too crazy with this. You've got this zone here, which is, you could almost call this either. Let's call it a base candle for now, just because the overall picture looks good here. Again, these are smaller time frame trades. Look at more 2, 3 to 1 returns on this rather than the big trend changing moves here. But still, areas to just take day trades in, get a little bit of income off of. Litecoin. As a quick reminder where we're at in the bigger picture, we've got this gap down 2 days ago, a gap down below the Bollinger Band here, so we knew price was going to come up a little bit from there, but no zones that we're actually looking at using, so we're not going to recommend any trades here. 240-minute time frame, we're still, this hasn't created any zones either on its move down, other than you could potentially, as price comes back down here lower, look for that negative divergence on RSI, and then see if you could find a smaller time frame zone in here that would be worth taking, because you've got additional confirmation as it will be a counter trend trade. 60-minute time frame, our lovely, wonderful picture here of a nice Bollinger Band squeeze. Right, when it squeezes this much, eventually, something is going to pop from this. But again, unless you have an actual zone to use, we don't take that risk. We don't gamble on those. We do have a very clear picture perfect zone right here, where we've got price coming in, leg candle in, base out, drop, base rally, base rally. Since the second leg out is much bigger than the first leg out, we know price is going to come a little lower into this overall area. So I'm going to move my entry point right to the midpoint here. This is actually a pretty strong area here. Just note that on a bigger time frame, you're still, this will be a counter trend trade. On a smaller time frame, you're neutral, so that's why it's okay. That this does check the box for you're able to take the trade. Would not, again, this is not going to change the trend, but it's a good solid day trade. Let's go down to our 15-minute area here, and let's see, we'll zoom in. I'm looking up and left first. Nothing here. Right, down and left. You've got this. Technically, yeah, actually got some an interesting formation right here. Just overall, let me zoom in on this even more. So, yeah, and this is a lot of zones stacked on top of them. So we'll use this as a real quick learning experience. We got a couple of minutes here, right? So you've got this area right here. This is your picture perfect zone. You know, it's drop, base, rally, and then you got base, rally into another couple of candle formations and a drop, base, rally again. Each one of these has its own unique odds enhancers. I will say that, so if we technically would draw this one right here, right? Because and when you look left, you can see this zone right here took out the 1, 2 to the left here, very strong. Price, for all intents and purposes, came back down into it. But it came down into it and then it created this zone right here. Which you can draw this way, or you could actually bring it all the way down here. So what I would do with these is, let's zoom back out again. So again, look left first. Each one of these has its own kind of indicators of what it took out before. And unfortunately, there isn't a strong reason why you wouldn't take. The only one I would say that would be a strong one, no, would be this one here, because price technically came back down into it. So you've got these 3 zones right here. Each one of them has its own strengths and potential weaknesses. And honestly, you've got another one right down below here, which you could say this one did use. These are the ones where you got this much stacked up on top of each other. You want to know which one to take. I would say none of these are set and forget trades unless you're going to do them all, which is very difficult to actually pull off. So watch price action as it comes down into here. Look down on a 5-minute or 2-minute chart. Get that confirmation for which one of these is going to work. I'll leave them all marked, and then we'll come back, tomorrow and take a look and see if see what's going to work here. All right, we've got what here? A couple minutes left. I'm going to go to the bottom of my stock chart and just kind of run through these real quick just to see if there's anything that's of significant interest to us. And we've got Activision Blizzard, which pops down into this weekly area here just below it and is now starting to move back up again. No negative divergence on RSI. So no other indicator that this is going to work other than this lower zone here. If we get a move up and then back down again, that could then give us that negative divergence, which would be another good indicator to take the lower zone versus the upper one here. Let's see, Zoom. Zoom came very close to its monthly zone right down here, and it hasn't quite got there yet. And again, not a lot of historical data since it's a relatively new company, so you want to be careful with that. But that is still it is a very strong area and very low on the overall chart. But nothing else that I'm looking at for Zoom right now. Let's go to Wayfair. And I don't think I had any zones drawn on here. Nope, nothing at all. Let's go to ExxonMobil. Again, tied very much to the oil market. So you can use the oil market as a correlation for when it's a good time to trade any of the larger oil company individual stocks. I don't have any zones here to look at. Let's see, Wells Fargo. Nothing until we get much lower on the monthly chart. Let's see, United Health. They're doing a pretty strong move back up again. I haven't looked at them in a little while. Let's just pop open a daily chart here. And yeah, we're about to hit another all-time high again. So nothing, there's certainly no supply zones that we're going to try and hit here, and no demand ones that are forming that I'm interested in. Tesla. So, oh, we had a bunch of lines here on our 60-minute chart. This is what, I talk about. We literally just saw this on Litecoin crypto, where you have all of these zones stacked up on top of each other. You have no idea which one's going to work. It's hard to tell. So in this case, each one of these had their own indicators of why they were the right ones. This one, I'm gonna go ahead and mark these just so I make sure and remember to actually track them. But we had, none of these worked individually. I will say that when I'm dealing with stocks and ETFs, and particularly in options markets, my actual stops are lower than are different than the zones themselves. I'll give it a little bit of wiggle room here. So this one right here is I would still be, if I were and take a trade, and I did not, just for full disclosure, but I would not have gotten out on this one yet. But at the same time, right, you're now got confirmation that it worked a bit, so probably a stop moved up. So at least you would not take a loss on this one. But just so you know, as you're looking at the zones that I draw, and if you hear me talk about taking trades on options type of a position, you just know that my stops are usually set much wider than the actual zone themselves. I found that to be a much more profitable way to handle options trades. And that will be it for today. Thank you guys very much for joining the live show here, and then also for anyone who is watching later on, I appreciate you joining the show here. And if you have questions, comments, please leave them for us. We love looking at comments to see what we can do to make this better. And again, remember to subscribe to the channel. You get notifications as we post additional educational videos and other tips and helpful hints overall as we increase and move forward in our day trading activities. Have a safe and good trading day, and we'll see you tomorrow at 8:15 Eastern Time to look at another day's worth of daily trade setups.